This one's gonna be another headache, but still better than the alternative. Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and next time on Death Battle, we have the Jujutsu Kaisen man versus the Chainsaw Man. Now, as some of you may have guessed or have seen in my reaction to Gru versus Megamind, I am not particularly thrilled with all of the anime that Death Battle has been using lately. Not because I hate anime, I have nothing against it. It's the exact same as when they were using a lot of comics all around the same time. I just want more variety in my Death Battles, and would maybe like for them to put a little more thought into the scheduling of everything. I'm sure they have their own behind the scenes reasons for why they're ordering things the way they are right now, and maybe this doesn't really bother you guys all that much, but I don't know, it does kind of annoy me that they seem to be doubling up on series or similar kinds of series a lot more now, because it just means that people who are fans of other things are missing out a lot right now. Like, it's to the point where if they just didn't do Bakugo versus Reze now, then a lot of this would feel a lot more reasonable. But of course, a lot of this stuff does feel better in hindsight, because if you think back to any individual episode, you're usually just thinking back to that episode and not the ones that came out right before or right after. So if I try to go in with that mindset right now, then honestly, I am very excited for this episode. This is like the biggest new gen anime protagonist battle that we knew was gonna happen at some point. We just didn't know it was gonna happen right now. And they've changed and progressed a lot throughout their stories, you know, both Yuji and Denji, so it's gonna be cool to see Death Battle cover all of that. And of course, we can't just go back to Gojo versus Makima and know immediately how Death Battle is gonna cover this one, and I'm definitely very appreciative of that. Thankfully, one thing we know pretty well for sure is that both of these characters' power systems and specific abilities aren't gonna have any major issues against each other as far as can this even work as a fight. We know it's gonna be analyzed more or less in the most straightforward way possible. However, that does not necessarily mean that everything we're looking at here is straightforward, particularly in regards to the exact scaling that each of these guys should have at this point. Yuji's gotten very new material with Modulo, which is confirmed to be included in this, but makes his scaling less clear, and we've basically seen nothing covered on Death Battle feats-wise, whether they apply to Denji or not, from part 2 of Chainsaw Man. Speed is probably a little easier to gauge. For example, Denji's got a few feats that should put him from light speed to faster than light plus, such as dodging the American flag thrown from the moon to the earth by Yoru, and even blitzing her. The main Jujutsu Kaisen speed thing that gets thrown around is the microsecond black flash technique possessed by Yuji and other characters, and according to Death Battle themselves, this wouldn't even get to Mach 1000, let alone light speed or faster than light. Granted, there is some relativistic scaling within Jujutsu Kaisen that Death Battle seems to buy, such as Sukuna dodging EM waves from Kashimo after getting tired out by Gojo. Considering how other characters like Todo can compare to this, Yuji probably scales decently to this general level if applied, but either way, I'm willing to bet that Denji's got a sizable edge in the speed category. Now let's discuss their abilities. Being a devil hybrid like Reze means Denji can continuously heal from severe injuries using his own blood and by ingesting others' blood. He has devil pawns, which can help sustain him for a time, and can even rip out his own heart and have that regenerate a new separate body if absolutely necessary. But Yuji's healing, while not as impressive as Denji's is at its best, can still recover from big damage and isn't reliant on anything that can as quickly or easily run out like blood levels, which would turn more in his favor the longer the fight went on and the more damage dealt. Yuji's own blood is also kind of poisonous to basically any living thing that it enters, and while it may not be fatal to Denji, he's not going to be healing from it as well as, say, anyone else's blood. Additionally, Yuji has some powers that are tedious at best and really dangerous at worst. His shrine ability lets him fire tons of invisible slashes from crazy distances and continuously, which may be difficult for Denji to detect and can definitely overwhelm him while Yuji keeps his distance. He can also dismantle a being's soul, which if employed kind of just works around the physical healing altogether. Yes, he has to touch the target in order to do this, except for the domain expansion, which, if caught in it, guarantees the hit. So while Denji is a lot faster, Yuji's battlefield control and range are far superior, and could wear Denji down and make it difficult for him to get in close. And by the time he does get in close, when he's a lot lower on blood, or if he hasn't just completely run out by that point, that would actually make it easier for Yuji to use his durability bypassers like the domain expansion, which, if I'm being honest, I don't think Denji would see coming or know how to properly avoid anyway. I would also say Yuji is generally better in terms of combat skill, and thanks to the 70-year time skip, or near 70-year time skip, into Modulo, he would also have a much greater quantity of experience over Denji at least. But they're still both very smart, capable on-the-fly thinkers. So by this point, I think this outcome is really going to depend on how Death Battle perceives the stat differences, because I think it's fairly obvious that, stats being equal, Yuji's got better abilities, range, and longer lasting regen, and all of that put together just gives him an easier time killing Denji than the other way around. But if Denji's speed and power are so far above Yuji's that he can kind of just outdo his healing immediately by splattering him immediately, then that's also pretty cut and dry. From my understanding, Denji's speed is probably at the level it would need to be to do that, but power and blunt durability are a lot tougher to judge. Not just in the sense of assuming what these guys can reasonably scale to, but also assuming how Death Battle will calculate the stuff they do decide to use to begin with. I have seen incredibly wide ranges for each of their max power, so the best thing I can do is go off of what I think is most fair / what I think Death Battle is most likely to roll with, as difficult as that may be. Yuji is almost definitely not going to be given Sukuna for this, because he's actually been without him longer than he's been with him by the time of Modulo, and his power would have increased to the point that that's not even really a handicap there. Within the context given, even if we're not given a lot of it, I think it's fair to say that Yuji at that point is as strong as the strongest characters in the main Jujutsu Kaisen series, if not even stronger. Trying to find the most impressive feats Yuji can match or exceed by this point, stuff like the Umibozu curse being able to sink an island, Kenjaku surviving the pull of Yuki's miniature black hole, and more, should easily get to the mid to high megatons of TNT range. Yuji has a feat of his own where he collapses his own domain, and given its diameter and the shockwave produced, this has been calculated to get around the low gigaton range. This is somewhat consistent with Gojo being able to power a country with his cursed energy, and again, Yuji is probably even stronger by the time of Modulo, we just don't know by how much. For Denji, I'll specifically be looking at the Hero of Hell / Denji Man states for his best potential scaling, like what was done for his speed. Going back to Yoru, she has some impressive feats, like slamming the Gun Devil so hard it exploded a huge chunk of Mount Elbrus, which could also get to the high megatons, low gigatons range. Factoring in full power with Pochita, we're probably looking at a decent to hefty multiplier on top of that. There was also the time that Yoru turned or compressed 2 US states into swords, but the power of these kinds of weapons is determined by her guilt rather than what they're made out of, and even then, they had no problem cutting through Pochita. Another major Chainsaw Man feat is the Falling Devil's gravity reversal, which I have seen so many crazy different estimations for. The one thing I know for sure, however, is that back in Gojo vs. Makima, Death Battle placed that ability below the aforementioned JJK miniature black hole. So regardless of how they interpret those abilities or calculate them or whatever, it's safe to say that they would put Modulo Yuji above the Falling Devil. That's in no way a hard cap on Denji's power either though, because he's fought the Falling Devil in base. And there's also an argument to be made for Pochita scaling around primordial devils like the Darkness Devil, since the Chainsaw Devil is the devil that's most feared by other devils. However, like with Yuji, it's tough to say to what extent or even how strong the Darkness Devil should reasonably be. So once again, the question is posed. Does Denji have both the speed and the strength to blitz Yuji and thus render all of Yuji's advantages moot? And to be honest, I don't know. Like I said, it's difficult to say to what upscaling extent Yuji or Denji is going to be given, and it's hard to say how Death Battle's calculations are going to be different from my own labeling here, because I'm sure it will be different. I think there's a good chance Denji is stronger than Yuji in general with Pochita's best, and that paired with a speed gap would not be ideal for Yuji at all. But I also don't necessarily think the strength is so much greater that Yuji wouldn't be able to keep healing until he gets the opportunity eventually to employ his own abilities that would seal the deal for him. This does not feel like it needs to be this complicated. What I'm realizing by saying all of this is, Yuji's advantages are more concrete and easy to tell, while Denji's could possibly pose bigger problems. So I feel very unsure about all of this, and I know this could unravel very quickly, but I am currently more confident in Death Battle saying that Yuji's crazy abilities like Shrine, the domain expansion, etc. would definitely be able to wear Denji down and take him out, than them saying that Denji's power is so much greater than Yuji's that he would outdo his healing immediately before any of that happened. They could say that, and that's why I'm really on the fence, but they could also plausibly argue that Yuji's about even with Denji, or at least close enough. And Denji's speed, while crazy, I don't think would be enough on its own given everything else that Yuji has. As annoying as it is to get this episode when we're getting it, I am really interested in seeing which way Death Battle leans and why. This feels like one of those predictions where whichever way I go, I'm gonna get it wrong, even though I know that's not how it works. Denji could definitely win this with the right arguments, and I would really like to see Denji win. You know, I like Denji. It would be cool to see him give Chainsaw Man a dub on Death Battle for once. But if I really have to lean one way for this, which is kind of the point of this video, then I have slightly more faith in Yuji Itadori being strong and tough enough to secure the win in time with his abilities and skill. But of course, I want to hear what you guys have to say. Who do you think is going to win? Are you excited for this battle? Let me know down in the comments below. Love to hear what you guys have to say. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, comment your comments, subscribe if you want to see more from me. Huge thanks to the channel members as always. You guys are absolutely amazing. But yeah, that's it for me. I will see all of you guys in the next video. Peace out.